So the boxes were packed. Goodbyes had been said. The furniture was staged perfectly in the garage. Alex and I had just gotten back from our honeymoon. We were a young 22-year-old couple getting ready to go off into the great unknown of North Carolina. We had packed up her little duplex that she had been in. We had packed up my little house that I was living in with a bunch of guys, and we were all ready for the next morning. I was going to go pick up the Penske, and we were going to start our grand journey to start our new lives together in North Carolina. The boxes were packed, the goodbyes were said, the furniture was staged, and I got a call from my father. This wasn't a particularly rare occurrence. It was a little bit late for him to be calling, but he had a vested interest in this move. He had saw it as an investment opportunity to purchase a duplex for us, and then he knew he had some pretty reliable renters, and so he had a vested interest in this. And he called, and I didn't get the nice pleasantries of, "Hello, son, are you ready for your move?" or "Tell me of your honeymoon." And instead I got, "You're not moving tomorrow." I said, "Dad, the boxes are packed, the goodbyes are said, the furniture's staged, we're ready to go. What do you mean we're not moving tomorrow?" And that's when my dad began to explain to me that there's someone called a surveyor. And the surveyor had emailed him that evening to let him know that the duplex that we were getting ready to close on wasn't where it was supposed to be. And so my dad's explaining this to me. I said, "Well, what do you mean it's not where it's supposed to be?" And he said, "Well, it's in the wrong place." He said the surveyor went through the plot and then the location of it, and somehow the duplex was built 8 feet over the property line. So my dad tells me this and says, "You're not moving tomorrow." And I said, "Dad, it's fine. It's a duplex, right? It's got 2 bedrooms, 1.5 bathrooms, whatever that means. I think it's got a working stove. There's some paint that needs to be done, but the house is all there. Why does it matter if it's in the wrong spot?" And he said, No, you don't get it. He said, if anything bad happens, if there's ever sort of a dispute about who owns that land, there's no clear deed to the property. It's over the plot line, 8 feet. And so we go back and forth, and finally I realized that because the house was built in the wrong place, it didn't matter that the boxes were packed and that the goodbyes had been said and that the furniture was staged. We were not moving the next day. Now I tell you that because as I look at the landscape of the American family, as I look at the individual families that we have here at this church, who I am so thankful to be a part of their lives as well, I realize that for many of us, our houses are built not where they're supposed to. And not our physical homes, but the home life that we've built in our family units. A lot of us have nice looking homes. We have maybe a job or two that pay pretty well. Maybe we have kids that for the most part behave sometimes. We have everything to the outside world, and our Instagram and Facebook looks great. But we have our foundation in the wrong location. Many families have a working foundation in the wrong location. And so the purpose of this sermon series called Homebuilding is to say, how can we take a step back? How can we jack up our homes and look at what's underneath? Because far too many of us wait until the walls crack and wait until the doors won't close and wait until a pipe bursts to really do hard looking and hard working in the inner workings of our family and of our home lives. And so immediately off the bat, anytime I preach on marriage or family, I always make some disclaimers. So I want to do that now. Because I know that the second I say family, I've taken out of the conversation in our minds a lot of different groups and different demographics in this room. So I want to be clear about something, that when I say family, I don't just mean the 2-story house, the 2.5 kids, and the golden doodle running around in the white picket fence outside. That's not what we talk about when we talk about family. While yes, that's kind of maybe for some of us the vision that we have of family, family is much bigger and much deeper than that. As we look through the scriptures in this sermon series, we'll see that the real true family unit is not the people that share our last names, but it's the family of God that we call the church. That's where the true family ministry happens. And then our own individual family units, those people that we love because we have to sometimes, those types of families are really just a microcosm of the church. That in our own homes, in our living rooms, in our bedrooms, in our dining rooms, that's the place that we work out what we're learning at church and then influence the church. We show God's love and God's forgiveness and God's mercy as a picture of what's going on in the big family called church. What that means is that if you're not a parent with children in the home, if you're widowed, if you're divorced, if you're a single person who's never been married and doesn't have kids, if you're a married couple that doesn't have kids, that means that you need to be thinking about the family that we call Christ UMC, your church family. Use the period of time that you're in, no matter where you're at, to leverage the gifts God has given you to pour into this family. There's some really practical ways to do that. Right now, the Lumpee household is a constant revolving door of college students. I don't know how many of them got a copy of my key, but they did, and so they're constantly in and out, and it means our family life is really hectic, but I love it because there's young single women and young single men who are coming into our house, who are spending time with us and who are loving on my daughter well. I love that. That's using their position to leverage to bless other people. That's what we saw at Vacation Bible School a few weeks ago. That folks that hadn't had kids in their home for decades were willing to take out a week to love and to serve other children. That's what it's all about. That's using and leveraging the family of God that he has given all of us in church to learn about family, to serve the next generation. So that's my first disclaimer. This is a sermon series for everyone. The second disclaimer is this. Every single family is dysfunctional, okay? Every single family is dysfunctional. Say this with me. My family is dysfunctional. My family's dysfunctional. Some of you are louder than others. We'll talk later. Every family is dysfunctional. Even if it looks like they have the perfect home life. Even if when you're scrolling through Instagram, it looks like there is always a chef-inspired meal and there is not a speck of dust anywhere, they're dysfunctional. They've got an uncle that they don't like to talk about. If I were to come into their home, there would maybe be some things that they would hide. We all have dysfunction. Nobody comes to this conversation saying, I'm the perfect family man, I'm the perfect family woman. We're all coming from a posture of humility to say, God, what does your word say about the family, and how can we implement that with the people that are around me that share my last name? So this morning we are laying the foundation, and we're going to start that by looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Paul gives us some really, really practical teaching on what it looks like to lay a foundation. He says this in verse 10. According to the grace that God has given to me, like a skilled master builder, I lay a foundation, and someone else is building upon it. Let each one of us take care of how he builds on it. For no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. You can fool yourself and think that your foundation is something else, but unless that foundation is Jesus Christ, the walls are going to crack, the doors won't close, the pipes will burst. You can try all you want, but you can only lay your foundation on the one true foundation, the solid rock of Jesus Christ. Paul continues. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, with silver, with precious stones, with wood, with hay, with straw, each one's work will become manifest. For the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive an award. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but as through fire. So what Paul is doing here is giving us kind of a precursor to a lesson that we teach to our children called the 3 little pigs. Right, you remember the 3 little pigs? You taught this, huff, puff, blow, house down, big bad wolf, that kind of stuff. That's what's going on here. Paul's saying, look, you can build your home on something other than the Christian values. You can build your home on something other than Jesus Christ. But what's going to happen? The big bad wolf is going to come. The big bad wolf has many different names: getting laid off, a wayward child, divorce. And when the big bad wolf comes and blows, Paul calls it the day, when that happens, what is left standing? And he's saying, look, if you're building your foundation off something really shiny that looks nice like gold, like your accomplishments, like your work life, if you're building your foundation on something that's really quick and convenient like wood or like straw, when the fire comes, when the wind blows, when trial arises, and it will, you'll be left with nothing. He says you've got to make sure that your foundation is in Jesus Christ. Now that's very churchy. If you're not a church folk and you're here today, that seems really simple and overly simplistic. Okay, fine. Let's talk about what that actually means. To do that, we've kind of got to take a step back and do some theology work. So join in. It's going to be a ride. So, the primary purpose, because if this is our foundation, we need to know what the primary purpose. The primary purpose of the family is the glory of God. Period, hard stop. That's the primary purpose of the family because that's the primary purpose of everything. The primary purpose of your job is the glory of God. The primary purpose of your relationships is the glory of God. The primary purpose of your hobbies is the glory of God. God has created this world and given it to us in such a way that all of creation might bring glory unto him, including our families. But as God's gracious act of giving of himself, there's a second purpose as well behind everything in the created order. The first is the glory of God, and the second, a good gift, is our joy. That everything God has given us is primarily for his glory, but secondarily for our joy. That includes our family. Friends, let me get real here. No matter what when you think about your family, whether it's your kids and your spouse or your parents or your grandparents or your brothers and sisters, no matter what you think about in your family is not a burden. They might feel that way sometimes, but they are not a burden. They are for God's glory and for your joy as well. But here's what happens, and I see this so often, and this is going to be convicting to some of us. What happens is that especially in the modern American world, we get those two orders mixed up. We think the primary purpose of our family is joy, is good things, is love, is respect, is honor, is making sure that my kids never want for anything and are always dressed the nicest and are in the best dance studios and on the best baseball team. We think that's primary, and then secondarily, maybe the glory of God if we have time on Sunday mornings. What happens when we get those two purposes reversed is that we treat what should be the foundation as a decoration. What should be the foundation is the glory of God, but when we put our joy first, then we just hang a cross over the cracks in our walls. Where everything around us is crumbling, we just put up a nice picture of Jesus to cover it up. When our walls start crumbling, we run to church. We pray out to God, God, where are you? When we should be laying him as a foundation. And so really, I want to ask you, and I want you, no matter what your family looks like, to have this conversation. What is the foundation of our family? Is it the glory of God? The good news is that a lot of what you do, a lot of the activities and the frenetic pace that you're experiencing, the work and the activities and the kids and the school, all of those can be done for the glory of God, but you've got to shift your thinking a little bit. So a way that you can tell what's your foundation, how you can get to the bottom of what's really driving your family, there in your notes, is to do what I call the why game. And if you've raised a 3-year-old, you already know this game very well. You start asking why. Take 2 activities that your family did this week. Was it a vacation? Was it a practice? Was it getting ready for school? Was it shopping? Pick 2 activities and start to ask why. Well, why did we send her to that practice? Well, because she's good at it. Well, why do we care that she's good at it? Just start asking those questions over and over and over again and begin to see what your foundation is. Paul says in Colossians 3 that we can do everything. He tells slaves, do everything that you're doing for the glory of God as if working for the Lord and not for men. What that means is that you may have to get rid of some of your activities, But a lot of them can just have a shift in focus to saying, we're not doing this to make sure that you get into the best school. We're not doing this because I'm trying to relive my academic prowess in your life. We're not doing it for those reasons. We're doing it for the glory of God. Now, as we talk about family discipleship, I know that this is an intimidating subject for many of us who think, I don't have the knowledge, I don't have the know-how, I don't know how to incorporate God into my family, especially now that my kids are older. You may be saying, we would come to church occasionally, but it'd be kind of awkward if I come in and institute family discipleship, right? And I think that comes from a kind of a warped view of what family discipleship means. So I think a lot of us, when we think about making the foundation of our families God, we have this sort of picturesque vision of discipleship. Here's what I mean by that. I mean, you may think that to make disciples of your children, you've got to pick out a Jesus night and say, you know what, Tuesdays, 6:15, family discipleship, be there. We're going to pop in some Chris Tomlin. We're going to sing together. We're going to turn on a YouTube sermon. We're going to take notes together. 35 minutes of silent prayer. And if no one is bleeding or screaming after that, we will reward ourselves with half an episode of the VeggieTales. Now, if your family does that, bravo, please keep doing that. But the families that I encounter, I know that if they set that up and they said, this is the night, something's going to happen. 6:15 on Tuesday is now the makeup for little Johnny's football game. 6:15 on Tuesday is now the time for Samantha's dance recital. At 6:15 on Tuesday, your boss calls and says, come and finish the TPS reports. Get in here now. The world has a way of mixing it all up. But friends, the good news is that family discipleship and making God a foundation of your family is much, much simpler than that. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, we see one of the fundamental texts of the Old Testament. You've probably heard it 1,000 times before. It's called the Shema. It's something that the Jewish people, even to this day, will memorize, will have it in their homes as a central point, as a center focus of their faith. So as I read this, I want you to think through the lens of family discipleship. What does this have to do with how I make disciples of my children, with how I spur my parents on to be disciples? How can I implement this in my home? Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your might. This is the fundamentals of the Christian faith. So families, if you think that you're not equipped, if you can teach that the Lord is one, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is one, and it's our responsibility to love him, not to just obey him, but to love him, you have all the theology degree that you need. It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. Verse 6, and these words that I command to you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. And you should talk of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your head, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. We're given here a very simple but very powerful paradigm and blueprint for how to make disciples in your home. It doesn't have to be 6:15 on Tuesday night, Jesus night. But what are we told here? Teach these things diligently to your children. You shall talk of them when you sit at your house. Do you sit at your house? Talk about the things of the Lord. When you lie down, do you say a nightly prayer with your children? Do you say a nightly prayer with your spouse? When you rise up, wake them up with the good news of the truths of God. As you go on your way, they didn't have cars back then, but chances are at some point during the week, you are riding in a car with members of your family. And so the paradigm that the Bible is giving for how to make disciples of your children and how to build a home on the foundation of Jesus Christ is use the daily rhythms of your daily life to implement the truths of God. You don't have to make it a calendar item. Just build it into what you're already doing. I think the primary place that this happens is the dinner table. Discipleship happens at the dinner table. And this isn't some metaphorical dinner table. This is the actual place where you gather around and you eat. And listen, I get that this is a relic of the past. Studies will say that the frequency of a family dinner is down 33% in the past 20 years in my lifetime. I get that this is kind of an idealistic thing in the frenetic pace of your home. But I also know that the studies will say that children who eat regularly at the dinner table will have lower signs of stress, will have a less chance of depression, and report much better relationships with their parents. All from saying, we're going to gather around and we're just going to eat. We're going to say a prayer before. We're going to talk about what's going on at school. We're going to talk about what's going on at work. This is not revolutionary ideas, folks. This is something that God has made for all of us. You have to eat. Do it lovingly with your family. So listen, I want to challenge you that if you're not doing this, because the Lumpee household is bonkers. We rarely ever have a day to sit and breathe. But I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to challenge myself too, one day a week, say we're going to have a family meal. That may happen at 9:30 at night. That's okay. But we're going to sit around a table. We're going to look each other in the eyes. We're going to turn the TV off, and we're going to leave our phones in the other room. We're going to talk with our mouths, not with our fingers. We're going to love one another. We're going to talk about the goodness of God and where we saw it. Listen, that can transform the way you think about your family and the way you think about your faith. It will transform your children as well. If you're a single person, sit down once a week with members of this family that we call church. Get to know them. Practice the same thing. Lay the foundation now for one day, if God gives you a family, that you have those rhythms already built in. Discipleship happens at the dinner table. And listen, I want our church family, that's a family of a bunch of smaller family units together. I believe that we can lead the charge in our culture, in our city, in our community, to say family matters and our foundation is the solid rock of Jesus Christ. Because when we talk about families, it's not just about the people that share your last name. The impact and the influence that you can have on others, on society, on culture, you can't even fathom. Because as our families go, so go our church. As our churches go, so goes our nation. It's a big deal. It may be intimidating, it may be scary, but friends, listen to me. You have all the tools you need to make disciples of those little rugrats that you're constantly shipping around from practice to practice, to help encourage your parents to be in the Word, to love the Lord, and to have an impact on younger and older folks in this family of faith. You have all the equipment that you need to build the home, to lay the foundation on the one solid rock that is named Jesus Christ. Amen.